Hello, hello. Welcome to the Arcade Era Power Hour, episode 23. Um, I'm Gibbon, as usual. Totally
And I'm
remembering.
Milo.
Yeah, nope, go ahead.
No, you did remember to say your name up top, which is great. I applaud you for this. Very good, very good. We're quickly becoming professionals.
Yep, totally.
I'm
Totally know what we're
I'm
doing.
Milo, the co-host of the Arcade Era Power Hour.
And joining us is a special guest.
Friend of the show. We've talked about his work before. He's a member of the community, um, and an artist who does some really nice work, especially with Donkey Kong stuff. And it's Michael Julius Peterson.
Hey, thanks for the warm welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hello.
Juliusaurus, M-Dog. I go by many names on
Mm-hmm.
the DK community. Yeah, thank you
And
for having me.
our topic this week is sort of prompted by some of Michael's comments in Discord the past week. My understanding is that you got a chance to play Donkey Kong 3 on arcade for the
I
first
did.
time.
I went to Galloping Ghost in Brookfield, Illinois, which is
Ooh,
the
I've
largest
been there.
arcade collection, I think, in the world, or at least in the
Mm,
country. Um, and they have back-to-back Donkey Kong 1, Donkey Kong Jr., and Donkey Kong 3. And it's
mm,
beautiful, the arrangement. And actually, it's a whole row of Nintendo arcade games. It was my first time playing Donkey Kong 3 in the arcade, and it was amazing. It
mm,
just immediately made me, as soon as I got home, buy it on the Switch for arcade archives.
excellent.
So, yeah, won me over.
Yeah, so that sort of prompted a discussion of how the arcade games differ from their home ports, and we decided there was enough there to make an episode out of it. But before we dive into that, we have a bit of news to cover because it's been a minute since our last episode.
Yeah, it's actually been quite a lot of news. It's been a busy time for the arcade era, apparently.
Yeah, and I just happen to have a bunch of medical shit going on during that time. It was not well enough to record anything. But here we are. We're back. Everything's fine. I said it's fine.
Everything's
Uh,
fine. Everything's fine.
yep.
Great.
Um, let's just go through them in the order that I wrote them in the document, which was the order that I remembered that they happened. Um, so item one, in 1995, Fleetway Editions, a UK comic company that you might know for
Mhm.
Sonic the Comic, they put out a Donkey Kong Country issue with 3 comic stories in it and some extra backup material as well. And this is incredible. Apparently, nobody in the DK community knew about it, but it was recently photographed by John Szczepaniak and uploaded to a Nintendo Life article.
I swear I've read it before, but I also swear it was like in German or something. So I don't know. Maybe my memory is weird.
It's possible. The only reference point I had for this comic was while looking at old Spanish video game magazines, there was a news article in one of them about this comic being
Mm.
produced. And I was like, as far as I'm concerned, this is the only evidence that this exists. But it's just that nobody had bothered to scan it or anything. And it's still not
Yeah,
scanned, but
it's
there's photos of it.
it's
So,
surprising how often that sort of thing happens. I get contacted by a lot of people going, "Oh, hey, I noticed you posted about this thing that no one's actually bothered to archive before. Would you be willing to scan it or dump a
mm.
ROM or something?"
Yeah,
Yeah.
just a couple of days ago, somebody contacted me about the Donkey Kong card game, the Japanese
Mm.
trading card game,
Oh,
because I maintain an archive of image scans of it. And they said they want to put it on Tabletop Simulator so anyone can play it
Ooh.
virtually, which is an
exciting.
awesome idea.
Ooh.
But
So exciting.
apparently, I'd neglected to scan the back of the card because there's 2 card backs
Oh
with a red outline
no.
for most cards and a yellow outline for character cards.
Hmm.
So anyway, that's beside the point. Did both of you have a chance to check out the Donkey Kong Jungle Action Special?
I skimmed a little.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
skimmed through it. I checked out the part that references Pauline at least.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Because it's as was pointed out to me when was it Glow Squid who posted it and tagged me?
I believe so.
Like, hey, Donkey Kong Country comic that references Pauline by name, and I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah, it was all
Yeah.
new to me. It's amazing. So, like I said, there's 3 stories. One of them is like a pretty basic action story with DK and Diddy getting the bananas back.
Mm-hmm.
The third one is kind of fun. It's Diddy guarding the bananas and Donkey's like secretly helping him to fight off Kremlings. But the middle one is Cranky being kind of interviewed or like there's this like reporter, this sleazy reporter guy who is telling him that Pauline wrote a book about their experiences back in the day. Then there's a big flashback to DK94 style Cranky.
Yep. Good stuff.
It is really
yeah.
good. Like, it is really worth a read or
Yep.
a look through.
Yeah. And there was an article about it on Nintendo Life. Yeah, Nintendo Life. That we'll include so other people can check those out because yeah, as Michael says, worth a read.
My favorite part of the magazine was the new Kong character that they introduced. There's a bit in the middle where it's learn to draw Donkey Kong, and there's this cartoonist Kong called Ringo.
Go.
Always new Kongs popping up in weird places. Which kind of segues into our next news bit. Milo, you did a big art piece with all of the Kongs and Kong buddies in it.
Oh, is that news? I was gonna pull that out in plugs at the end. I don't know.
I think it's newsworthy at least.
In that case, I will talk about it. I was working on this piece for months. I decided that I'd previously drawn my typical pixel art style cast portrait of the main Kongs in the series, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to expand on that. And then every few weeks, I'd rethink it and say, I'm going to expand it even more, and more and more and more. So the final tally is I've drawn 101 Kong characters and 213 other like friends and enemies and buddies and stuff. It was a truly mammoth undertaking that used up a lot of my free time over a long period, but it's all worth it.
101 Kongmations.
I was so happy to get to the 100 Kong mark, and I was like, it's perfect. And then Ringo showed up in this comic, and to add him.
Added him.
Need to discover more unknown Kongs.
Yeah, so I've included Kongs from the cartoons and comics, from other slightly related games, from bootleg games.
Did
it's
you
a
by
lot
any
of fun.
chance and include Julius Kong? The
Uncle Julius?
Uncle Julius, of course.
Of course
yeah.
we did.
Yeah. So
After covering Saturday Supercade on the show, I couldn't not include Sonny and Uncle Julius and Mama.
My guy, right there.
Exactly. Namesake.
So yeah, that was a really impressive piece, and I think it deserves more attention. So
well, thanks for the plug.
Yeah.
The next news piece is from a high quality Twitter feed, VG Arts and what is it? VG Art and Tidbits.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
We've talked before on here about the Donkey Kong coloring and activity books from the early 80s. But the scans of them are a bit spotty online. So it was nice that they put up 4 very clean scan images from, I think it's Return of Donkey Kong, one of the later coloring books. This is the one where Mario, in his capacity in the context of these coloring books, is working in an amusement park. He's repairing things in the haunted house ride and suddenly gets accosted by a bunch of ghouls and monsters and such.
It seems more like a classical Midway than an amusement park, but yeah.
Sure, yeah. And of course, Pauline is imperiled at some point, and there's a vampire and all this stuff.
Yeah. Anyway. I noted with some glee that it's kind of evocative of those knockoff Crazy Kong LCD games where they've just rebranded one of those like Hammer horror mashup games, but called it a Kong game without actually changing anything else. So they have like Frankenstein's monster in them and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
it fits really well coincidentally with that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, seasonal.
Yeah, exactly. I just wish there were more
Yeah.
good quality scans like this, but there's only 4 in this tweet.
Mm-hmm.
But it's something. It's more than we had before.
Someday I'll sit down and see if I can grab physical copies of all these various activity and coloring
Mm.
books and stuff and sit down and scan everything. I say, looking forlornly at the like 3-inch high stack of Getsufumiden magazines I have to scan still. I'm getting through them. Oh my god. But yeah.
The next item I just added as a filler when I didn't think there was much news, but there's a lot, so I'll go through it quickly. There was a recent trailer for upcoming Animal Crossing DLC and updates. And in the Happy Home Paradise DLC portion, there was a shot of Caesar, the gorilla character, who
Mhm.
had a personalized room or house or whatever,
Hmm.
and the theme of it was a construction site. So there's red girders everywhere and construction equipment. And I
That's
was like, hey, nice.
such a mashup of fictional gorilla references. It's like, oh, we have Donkey Kong theming in the house, but his name is Caesar. How cheeky.
I love how every Animal Crossing reference to Donkey Kong is just cheeky. It's not like a direct Donkey
Yeah,
Kong.
yeah.
It's like,
Mm,
oh, it's kind of Donkey Kong. Okay.
mm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's
there
yeah.
hasn't been any explicit DK stuff since the DK barrel fortune cookie item in New Leaf, I believe.
Right, right.
Oh, that
I'm
one.
just surprised there's a Planet of the Apes reference so blatantly. So,
Yeah, I looked it up. His Japanese name is Alan,
I wonder
but
what that's
I
a
think
reference to.
yeah, who knows?
Mm,
I think it's more common for the character Louis to be given these kinds of Kong
Right.
references.
yeah, but Louie's just sort of a general Nintendo stand-in
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Has
because
the
like his
Luigi shirt
name's
or the Mario shirt.
yeah, he's wearing the Mario shirt. He's named
Yeah.
Louie and he's a gorilla. So,
Right.
let's see. Next on the news item list is all right. More and more info on the Super Mario Bros. The movie extended cut
Ooh.
VHS.
Mm.
Um,
What I had in mind for this was that they'd edited the additional footage from the work print VHS into the movie and made a full extended cut in
yeah,
VHS
yeah, yeah.
quality, and they'd put that up on archive.org.
Mm-hmm. Oh, right. I forgot they'd actually put that on
I should
archive.org.
have put a link to that in the show notes, sorry.
Mm. Well,
Good
we
info
can
here.
include that in the YouTube upload.
Ooh.
It's good. People should watch it. People should watch it anyway, and then watch the extended version. And listen to that tapes cassette thing, which is also on YouTube.
Yeah.
It's a good
I can't
movie.
find it. I'll get a link to it later.
I'll give it another chance.
Thank
I
you.
will too. I already liked it, but I'll keep giving it more chances. It's just like Mario to have more one-ups.
Definitely watch it before the next movie comes out.
Oh, totally,
Preparation.
totally,
Sure.
totally. I'm still baffled by the voice casting options on that, but whatever.
Hey, Donkey Kong and Cranky are in it. I am so
That's
excited to see.
that's true. I'm also kind of baffled by that. I'm baffled by who was cast for them, but I'm also baffled that they're even in the film.
Hmm.
So, well, maybe not baffled, gobsmacked. I'm surprised, very
Surprised they're
surprised and
going there
happy.
because Nintendo doesn't usually go there. So that's really
Like Foreman
Hmm.
Spikes in that movie. What is this movie about? Like,
Yeah, the inclusion of DK and Cranky makes a little more sense to me post DK Jungle Adventure in Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle,
mm,
because that was
true.
such a, Mario themed, giving Donkey Kong the acknowledgement of a larger role in a family
mm,
outside of just being a Mario spin-off
yeah, yeah,
roster filler or an arcade throwback, like direct throwback the way
right,
Odyssey
yeah.
was. Yeah,
Besides, everybody knows Mario is a Donkey Kong spinoff, not the other way around.
exactly.
True.
So let's see. I guess our most recent, in quotes, piece of news
Mm.
would be that I wouldn't say this is recently discovered. We recently found out that the Danish release of The Adventures of Super Mario Brothers 3 had live
The
action
cartoon.
bumper segments
Yeah.
in the vein of the previous Super Mario Bros. Show. And like, so there being bumper segments in other languages isn't exactly new. Like the Super Mario Brothers show.
The Super Mario Super Show.
Yeah, sorry. The Super Mario Super Show had
Oh, Brothers,
different
I forgot.
bumpers in other languages. Like I think the Korean one has some clips floating
Yeah,
around
we
on YouTube.
covered the Korean one on our like 5th episode of covering cartoons in the
Yeah,
arcade era.
and but the Adventures of Super Mario Brothers 3 didn't have bumpers in the English release, so it's kind of interesting that it did in other countries.
Hmm.
Um, and this Danish live action insert is sort of it's closer to Captain Lou, but I don't know, it's sort of in between like the Korean and English as far
Yeah.
as tone and aesthetics going.
I haven't seen the Korean one. I watched the clip of this, and they still have the Mario dance. I'm like, oh, I'm
Mm-hmm.
happy they continue.
Yeah,
The
it's crazy. They have a different Mario dance and a different plumber rap
yeah,
in Danish.
like
Yeah, we should
it's
mention that it's YouTube user the Sonicolas who is uploading these things, and they've been doing it at a steady pace over the last few days and adding English subtitles to them as well.
Ooh, I didn't notice that.
Yeah, hit the closed caption button and you'll actually see what they're
Oh,
saying,
right.
and
I
you'll
forgot
notice.
that YouTube got rid of proper
Yeah,
subtitles.
yeah. You'll notice if you do put those subtitles on that a lot of their speech relies heavily on Danish wordplay. So there's a lot of talk of rhyming mottos, and they're trying to make a new motto for their business that rhymes, and it just doesn't work at all in English. So it's very funny.
Fun.
It's also much lower budget than the Danny Wells and Lou Albano
Yeah.
segments. The set is so much smaller. There's no guests. It's much shorter, but
It's
it's
still closer to the original tone than the Korean
yeah,
one was, which was very like preschooly. I don't know how to describe it
yeah,
really.
very childish and bizarre.
Yeah. But yeah, so that was cool to find out about that.
Mm. Yeah, well, I'll keep an eye on that channel, see if they continue to upload them.
But yeah,
Pretty
I
interesting
think
stuff.
that about does it for news segments, unless something popped up in like the last hour or so.
Not that I noticed.
Okay.
Don't know.
In that case, as I said, our topic for this episode is arcade ports versus their home console editions.
Mm.
Um,
So why don't we
yeah,
start with Julius's story about going to the arcade?
yeah. Let's hear
Yeah,
about
sure. Well, I had played Donkey Kong, of course, Donkey Kong Arcade for years. Like, I'm so familiar with that. And in the Donkey Kong Junior Arcade, I'm like, I've played that too. But Donkey Kong 3, it I assumed it wasn't just I assumed it wasn't a good game because I played the NES version and it just didn't, I mean, for me, in my experience, I didn't really enjoy myself playing Donkey Kong 3. So when I got to this arcade in the in Brookfield, Galloping Ghost, the the game just surprised me. The animation, the sound quality, the game design. It's a really robust shooter. It has good platforming. Like, I was just shocked by
it.
how
Mm-hmm.
good this game was. So,
I think kind
yeah.
of contributing to less people having played the arcade version is it didn't ship dedicated arcade cabinets. It had to be done via conversion kit. That Donkey Kong 3 arcade probably did not start life as a Donkey Kong 3 arcade cabinet. Was
What were they
probably
Well,
something
converting
tell
else.
me
from?
because the cabinet at this arcade is just gorgeous. It fits in right next to
Oh yeah, no, the
you
conversion
mentioned.
kits like include panel art and
Mm.
stuff that you can slot into place because all of that is modular and removable.
Ah,
But
okay, so would explain why I haven't seen this arcade game anywhere else, but I have seen
Yeah.
one in Junior.
I don't know off the
Yeah, it
top of my
probably didn't
head
have
what was
as wide a
converted, but
release.
yeah. But that wasn't an uncommon situation for arcade games. I know like Skyskipper was either a conversion kit or they
Mm,
used the scrapped Skyskipper cabs for conversion into other things,
mm,
and stuff like that. So, but yeah, that's also just sort of like you find that in Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Jr. as well, that the NES versions are like they're like a decent, surface level representation of what was going on the arcade game, but like the NES just wasn't good for faithful renditions of arcade titles.
Especially Donkey Kong 3 because it was the last Donkey Kong arcade game, and the quality by what was it, 1983? I think the year
Yeah.
the game.
Mhm.
The designers and just the production value of this game is just really
Mhm.
really high. I was just really surprised. I feel like the NES at the time, which was I think also 1983 in Japan, uh, just couldn't keep up. It just could not keep up.
Yeah.
mm.
So yeah,
Um
that arcade is
Yeah,
especially impressive.
and it's
it
easy for the game to get a bad rap just as a service level cuz it's like, oh, they like ditched the platforming aspects and went with this sort of truncated shooter thing, and it's not Mario, it's this new character, and like, oh, it's so different, why is it so different? Sort
Mhm.
of attitude that I see a lot.
You see
um
over and over again in the Donkey Kong community.
it is
um
interesting because Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Jr. really uh, pioneered, well, they popularized the platformer genre,
yeah.
and before them, shooters were the main thing, and after them too. So having this hybrid come along,
Yeah.
it's interesting that it is a hybrid, but it kind of steps back away from the distinctiveness of the Donkey Kong franchise
hmm
up to that point.
it's interesting looking at something like Contra and being like, "Oh wow, this wouldn't exist without Donkey Kong 3," but nobody ever says that. Uh,
In a way, what was it, Radar Scope? That was the initial
Mm,
Kinda, yeah.
Donkey Kong in a way. It's kind of going back to that. It's like, oh, we started as a shooter. Let's kind of mix it together.
hmm
Donkey Kong plus
And
shoot.
I
mm,
tend to think part of the reason they went in sort of a bold new direction was because they were like fresh off of the Donkey Kong Jr. lawsuit, and they couldn't just use that engine again.
Mm,
mm.
So they kind of had to make something from scratch anyway. So you might as
It's a good
well
point.
be
yeah,
creative about it.
and then yeah, they were.
Yeah.
It was a nice hybrid genre.
hmm And I know it tends to get a lot of flack because like they put out that like, oh, the original arcade trilogy cabinet that had Donkey Kong Jr. and Mario Bros.
Right.
and
Mm,
stuff like that, because it's like, oh, you're looking at this trilogy from the perspective of Mario, not from the perspective of Donkey Kong,
mm.
sort of thing, because he tends to take a backseat to the Mario centric perspective of things.
Right.
Uh,
But that Donkey Kong 3, because it exists, we can say Mario is a spin-off, and
mhm.
Donkey Kong just kept going its same path.
We sure can. And it wasn't even the last OG Donkey Kong game. Like Donkey Kong 3 had follow-ups, which we've talked about on the show before.
Mm.
So yeah.
Plenty of Game and Watch.
Oh, there was also if you're unaware, the Daigakushu, the what would it be?
Right.
Strikes Back, I guess would be the
Mm.
best English approximation.
Yeah.
Which was more of a straight shooter without the platforming, but it's known for its surreal backgrounds. um,
Bizarre
and
version.
yep.
Uh, Parachute he's holding. Two parachutes.
Yeah, I like that. And just little things like that.
Yeah,
But
bizarre.
yeah, I guess one thing to sort of start on more generally is that you have the arcade version of these games, and then it's unlike today where you can just say the home console version, and it's like you more or less have a feature and graphics parity thing across all consoles for the most part, within margin of error. Um, we were just talking about this before we started recording, in that Donkey Kong 1 has roughly, half a billion different home console releases.
Mm.
And every time I sit down to document all of them, I just get dizzy because there's so many of them.
So
And
many.
so,
Yeah.
yeah.
While preparing for this episode, I was reading just the Mario Wiki page on Donkey Kong the game, and they've arranged it now in a really interesting way where they group the different ports by the company that was responsible for developing them, which
Ooh,
made them
interesting.
suddenly make a lot more sense to me. And it sort of fell into place that Atari handled, X number of platforms,
Mm,
and then Atari Soft, which is a separate sub company, did some other ones. Ocean did the home computer ports in Europe. So and those ports all have common features between them, like
hmm.
the Atari ones add a birthday cake collectible as one of Pauline's items, for example.
Oh.
Um, and yeah, like the graphical cutbacks or content cutbacks are similar between these versions within developer
Mm,
porter, uh, you know,
interesting. I should take a
things.
look at that.
Strange, there's a
Yeah,
common trend of not including the cement factory stage, pie factory.
yeah,
Yeah, I don't. That's kind of a common thing in all of these home console ports is they tend to leave out a level,
Yeah.
mm,
and it's pretty universal which level gets left out across different versions, and it's just kind of like, but why? Why that stage?
Hmm.
yeah. Unless you're the Atari 2600 version, and then you get two stages cut out,
Mm,
effectively making the game half the content.
uh, and sometimes you try to add an extra level, and Nintendo says no.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, they sort of range like they're all sort of high concept level the same game. Like you're all playing as Mario and going like through the same basic level
Yeah.
concepts, and you have the same sort of basic abilities of, jump over barrels, and there's the hammer power up, and you climb up ladders, and you got to get to the top sort of thing. But like they vary wildly in like graphical faithfulness and
Mm,
sort of like physics faithfulness, if that makes sense. Like I
Yeah.
know it's kind of people will scoff like it's 1981 arcade game. What sort of physics does it have? But the original Donkey Kong actually has a lot of quirks to it that aren't represented in the ports for the most part.
Yeah.
mm,
Like
And not
I
even the NES version is
yeah.
completely faithful.
And because they couldn't use the original source code for such a long time and had to sort of reverse engineer stuff, you end up with situations like the rendition of Donkey Kong in Donkey Kong 64 that looks like the arcade version, um,
I was told.
and is more faithful to the arcade version, but still has a lot of um, stuff from the NES version in it as far as like physics and tricks and quirks go, because they were probably working off of that version for gameplay purposes. Um,
It is an
mm.
impressive port. Probably the most impressive arcade port.
yeah, definitely. It was probably the most impressive before we got like other than emulation before we got the arcade archives release. Um, but as you have found with Donkey Kong 3, I just don't think you can compare to the originals.
And
They have just better graphics capability because consoles couldn't keep up back in the day with the
Mm.
just sort of as much graphical fidelity as we need attitude of arcades. Um, Not
I
that
think
they're like super impressive by today's standards, but they're still wildly more impressive than what the Famicom could do.
I think Donkey Kong 3, a big part of it that makes it more impressive is the number of objects on screen. Because obviously,
Mm,
so you can have tons of bugs and coconut,
yeah, yeah,
so many things happening that you
hmm
just can't do. Just can't do
yeah.
it.
Yeah, I played a little bit of both versions of the whole trilogy to compare them before this episode, and that was a striking feature of DK3 Arcade. Not just the bugs flying down that you shoot at, but sort of just for flavor, there's a cloud of bugs circling around the hives at the top of the screen before they start coming down.
Yeah.
So
And it just adds a lot to the atmosphere of the game, if nothing
Mhm.
else.
Yeah. There's just a lot going on in it.
it is a complex game, which is why an NES
Hmm.
struggles. And also, I feel the platforming element on NES. I don't know if it feels slower or it's the collisions or something a little off. But in the arcade, like
Mm.
you're moving quick, you're jumping.
Yeah, it's very snappy movement in the arcade version. I do
Yeah.
wonder where Junior would have been in the game, because in the arcade ROM, for lack of a better term,
Mm.
there's original sprites for Junior. I know a lot of
Really?
for a long time people thought they were like leftover from like Donkey Kong Jr. or something, but if you actually sit down and compare them, they are new sprites for
Oh,
Junior. It's just a couple frames of like him on a vine, but like I wonder where that would have gone. Like, would he have shown up in levels and you'd be like, I don't know,
that would have been.
protecting Donkey Kong or something? I don't know.
Oh,
Where would he have been?
I
Yeah,
would have loved to see that.
yeah,
Yeah, it almost seems like they planned a feature that, well, Junior fills that role in DK94 sometimes. He's kind of a secondary antagonist in the level, although you
yeah,
can't interact with
yeah.
him. Maybe he would have activated another hive or something,
Mm-hmm.
pop out and punch it.
Huh.
Yeah,
Speaking of, uh, if I can compare NES Junior to Arcade Junior,
yeah.
I
Go for it.
Mm.
prefer, I don't know, uncommon opinion, but I actually do prefer the NES version. I was
I'm
stuck on
glad you
level
said that.
2 playing the arcade version. Level 2 has like the one with the birds flying around,
Mm-hmm.
not the
Mm.
final stage, but I kept dying and dying and dying. It
Yeah.
is a
So
very stage.
you're not wrong. Donkey Kong Jr.'s NES port, because it was done from the ground up, is probably objectively better. So the thing about Donkey Kong Jr. Arcade is it's a ROM hack of Donkey Kong. Like it's built on top of
Right,
Donkey Kong and has a bunch
right.
of leftover stuff from Donkey Kong, except like whereas Donkey Kong was programmed by Ikigami, Donkey
Mm.
Kong Jr. was done by people at Nintendo hacking the Donkey Kong ROM,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't know what they were doing, to put it politely.
Explains it. That
So
explains so much.
so the people who did Donkey Kong Remix, when they sat down to do Donkey Kong Jr. Remix, they discovered a lot of stuff that was
Wow.
just really shoddy in Donkey Kong Jr.'s code. For instance, one of the reasons all of the hacks of the original Donkey Kong, like Jumpman Returns and Donkey Kong Remix and stuff, are possible is because barrels and springboards and stuff have rudimentary AI and will conform to the level. So if you make a new layout with ladders and holes and stuff, the barrels will conform to that and you don't have to do anything special. They'll just work,
Oh,
right? Um,
Nice.
this is not the case for the enemies in Donkey Kong Jr. They have hard coded paths.
Oh, they're
So
all scripted.
if you change the level layout, it won't matter. The enemies will still go like across where their set thing tells them to go. So like one of the first things they had to do for Donkey Kong Jr. Remix was program in new snap jaws from the ground up that would work dynamically.
wow. So
Wow,
that's
that is
that's
so
what they do.
fascinating.
Yeah.
They would have their own little AI or something, but
Uh huh.
that's all
Yeah.
on a path. Huh.
Yep. So
Wow.
the NES version, not being a ROM hack of another game, probably is why it's better.
Yeah,
Yeah, the NES version is
that's
snappier. I was gonna note the movement of the NES version. Like you're quick. You can just do the move
Hmm.
when you press the button.
So yeah, so that's why they were basically hacking new functionality into a Donkey Kong. They replaced Mario with Junior. That's why he's roughly the same size. Um, they had to hack in the vine climbing sort of behavior, and it conforms to Mario's jump arcs and stuff, and just things like that.
That's so weird.
So yeah,
Wow.
that's
So this
what's
does
going on
not
in
feel
Junior.
good. And the
Um,
arcade version of Junior does not feel good.
yeah,
yeah.
and also
I'm
they
glad
got
we're
in
all on the
trouble for
same
that
page about
because
that.
they did not own that code.
Oh.
So
That's the source of the lawsuit that
yeah.
led to, well, the decades long kind of erasure of the arcade versions
Hmm.
from re-releases and to some extent from the public consciousness, because they were replaced with the NES versions as the quote-unquote official,
Yeah.
you know, definitive version of the game, or the canonical version of the
Oh,
game.
And also why people got away with putting out like actual arcade boards of like Jumpman Returns and DK Remix and GK Junior Remix and stuff, because Nintendo was kind of didn't actually own that code, so
Yeah, so
it's
they were
kind of
unable to do their usual highly litigious strategy.
wow.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons. Like
Mm.
they're not actually as litigation happy as people make them out to be. Like
Mm.
they are more litigation happy than other companies. I'll give you that, but like there's tons of stuff they just don't care about because it's not like directly competing with anything they've put out. But I do notice that there haven't really been any new fan hack projects since the Arcade Archives releases. So I wonder if
Good
that
point.
sort of scared people off a bit.
Yeah,
Mm.
but also it's nice to see the arcade versions in the public eye
Yeah,
available to everyone. And it's even in reference in Smash Brothers, the new hammer
yeah,
item
yeah,
that is now based on the arcade. Really cool to see.
yeah. Um, so yeah, that's so yes. To circle back around, you're right.
Mm.
The console version of Donkey, well, the
What was a hot
Famicom
take?
version of Donkey Kong Jr. is better. Um, Unlike Donkey Kong 1, where some of the off Nintendo ports were probably better than the Famicom version.
Mhm.
Um, the off Nintendo versions of Junior are, I think, generally universally agreed to be kind of crap.
Yeah,
They're just not great.
I'm glad we're on the same page about Donkey Kong Jr. NES though, because that's one of the big takeaways I had from directly comparing them in a row.
Because I thought it was a hot
And
take by me. I was like, oh, this is
Hmm.
rare, rare.
yeah, I thought it was going to be a hot take for me too, but yeah, it seems to be a common opinion, which is nice. But I was going to say that not only does DK Junior on NES control better, much smoother, and feels better to play, it also sounds a lot better. A lot of the sound effects in the arcade version are very grating.
Yeah, Donkey Kong's growl or whatever you call it,
Mm.
voice sample of a gorilla, monkey. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the whole
Yeah.
idea of comparing how they play and like drilling down on the arcade versions of these games, not only is it a good thing for this podcast because we don't do that often enough.
Mhm.
I found Julius's observations, having just come out of the arcade, very refreshing to me. I was thinking about this before, why it was a revelation for him to say these comments. I think it's because for me, the meta layer of the content of these games and how it fits into the bigger picture of the series is often more important to me, based on how my brain works, than the observation of how is this specific game to play, especially when we're covering
That's
stuff on the podcast.
that's definitely fair. I'm
Kind of missing the forest for the trees kind of
well,
thing.
I don't as someone who thinks the way, I don't think you're missing anything. I definitely see where you're coming from there. I am also someone who will get caught up in the like, oh, I love the charm and atmosphere and meta stuff going on around this game. And sure, maybe it's crap to play, but I'm having fun with it. So,
Oh,
um,
we love the world building, the universe of
yeah.
Donkey Kong, but
Hmm.
the game.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't hear people say, "Oh, Donkey Kong 3 is a great game." You don't hear
Yeah.
that too often.
I do hope now that the Arcade Archive version is readily available that more people will be exposed to it and be able to say, "Oh, hey, yeah, this is fun," because like that's now the easiest version to get a hold of.
Hmm.
Like I guess there's the NES version on Nintendo Switch Online, but you need a Nintendo Switch Online subscription to access that. So, barring that, the Arcade Archive version, which is what like $8 or something, is the easiest version to get a hold of. So, yeah.
So, yeah, hoping for more people to discover that this is actually a fun time.
Yeah. But wait, there's more. There are more arcade games under our purview.
Yeah.
Um,
Speaking of arcade archives,
yeah.
that is the vector by which a lot of people discovered Skyskipper for the first time, because
Yeah.
it was never properly released in arcades. It's been available on MAME for a while, and for
Yeah.
some reason, well, when they were planning to release it, they commissioned a port to the Atari 2600, and that was released,
Yep.
but the arcade version never properly was, which is just
Speaking
fascinating.
of console ports that are kind of compared to the console version.
Well, I'm sure if Skyskipper was on NES, it would be more advanced, but
Would it?
like with the 2600 version of Donkey Kong itself, Skyskipper is extremely primitive.
Like, I don't actually know if the Famicom version would be much better. There's a lot going on in Skyskipper. Like, I
It's true.
totally get why the Atari version just cut out large swaths of the mechanics.
Mm.
So as a basic rundown, if you're unaware of the mechanics of Skyskipper, you are flying a plane around a large. Would you say it's like four screen, like 2x2 screen map, or no, it's a bit longer than
Oh,
it
it's
is
much wider than
tall.
that. Yeah.
So I don't know. It's a multi-screen in at least 2 screens in height and maybe at least 3 screens in width map. And there's multiple of these maps, and the maps are kind of complex. They have a lot going on,
Mm.
and there's more mechanics than just flying around, because you are rescuing citizens of the kingdom, which are represented by little animals with card suit symbols on them, as well as the members of the royal family. As you collect these, you build poker hands up at the top of the screen and get point bonuses based on the hand you build. Additionally, there's a fuel meter for your plane, and you need to manage like altitude and fuel consumption and stuff, and you can land and refuel, and like you can crash if you run out of fuel and die that way. In addition, there's enemies going around in the form of angry Kongs with, baseballs. They huck at you.
Naturally.
Um, yep. And
And you're
and
able to attack them, aren't
and
you?
you're able to attack them by like dropping, like bombing them basically.
Mm.
um and all of that and is there a time limit, or is it strictly a fuel consumption thing? I can't
Might just
remember.
be fuel.
But yeah, so all of that is going on, and there's multiple maps which have a lot going on, because they're not just open areas. Like, there's castles and interior areas you need to fly into, and like actual
Mm.
landscapes and stuff to go through, and it gets kind of tricky going through these and avoiding enemies, or baiting them out so you can then fly in and rescue animals or royalty.
Yeah,
And
given
yeah.
the complexity of the scenery and how you have to navigate it, it's almost like a different take on that platformer shooter hybrid that DK3 was trying to do.
And yeah, I kind of understand why it didn't do well with test audiences, and they didn't go for a wider release, because it was ridiculously
Right.
complex for an arcade game of the day.
And it was 1981, correct? It was like an early.
So yeah, it was really
Yeah.
early. But yeah, so the Atari version cuts out most of those mechanics. It still has animals that need rescuing as you fly around. Um, were there even enemies in it?
No
Yeah,
gorillas.
there's gorillas, but they don't do much because in
Yeah.
both versions you have to knock down the closest gorilla before the animals start jumping out of their cells to
Right,
be
right.
collected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's about it. Like the card suit thing. I don't
Yeah,
think the
that's gone.
fuel's there either. Um,
There's a speed up button. I think there's a fuel meter.
mm,
Yeah.
it's just animals. There's no royalty. The maps are really simplistic.
There's only two of them.
There's only two of them, and they're way
They're
smaller.
very basic. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's just really compressed. I would be super interested to see a Famicom translation of this game, because
Mm.
like it'd be I don't even know what like the closest parallel would be for what's already existing on Famicom.
now the what do you call it?
Metroid.
The terrain of Skyscape. What I'm looking at, it's like large, chunky pixels. It does kind of remind
Mm-hmm.
me of Popeye for NES.
Kind of.
Mm.
Like, are you watching a video or just looking at the maps?
Yeah, it's screenshots.
Mm. Yeah, it's kind of hard to describe. It's probably better to watch a video because it,
I have not played this game.
it's not like dynamic scenery, but as Milo alluded to, the animals are sort of embedded in it, and they'll hop out to be rescued once you knock over a nearby Kong. So there's little like windows and cells where the animals and
Yeah,
royalty will be
and
being held and stuff.
the construction of the scenery in the levels even tells a story. I think one level is supposed to be in France or something, but
Yeah.
like you said, there's castles. There's like a doom castle with a big skull on the top
Mm-hmm.
in one of the levels. So it's yeah,
There's just a
background
lot going
storytelling.
on in that game. It was
I'm watching a
very
video now,
very
and yeah,
ambitious for the day.
the active objects like the clouds, the
Mm-hmm.
enemies, characters you
Oh
collect.
yeah, I think
They are
you
like
die if you crash into a cloud.
Right.
really, jeez. They are really highly detailed sprites too.
Mm-hmm.
The backgrounds are like chunky pixels, but they even, yeah, as you were saying, the windows serve a function. Uh,
And like, yeah, I think like sort of not having actually spoken to anybody about it, it was sort of like they're coming off the high of the success of Donkey Kong and wanted to do a big ambitious title and just sort of put way more into the game than should have been in the game.
to their head.
You know? And you see that a lot in stuff where like the first hit will be a smaller budget and maybe they didn't put in all of their ideas and stuff, and then like the sequel will come out and it's just got way too much going on because they've let it get to their head a little bit. But yeah, it's for those reasons I can totally see why Nintendo was like, oh, this isn't actually doing well in our test release.
They weren't
Because
as refined for now.
it's it's definitely not something you can just sit down and pick up the way like Donkey Kong is.
Not to
So,
say it's a bad game. It looks
oh no,
like it
I
could be a
don't think
great
it's
time.
bad by any
Yeah,
stretch. It's just not it's not a casual arcade game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it doesn't have the accessibility of Donkey Kong.
Yeah, yeah. Um, it does have the accessibility of Donkey Kong? Mario Bros.
Good question.
oh,
Yeah, because one
sure.
of the questions I wanted to continue asking during this episode is, are home ports always worse than the arcade versions? But luckily we answered that pretty quickly. With Donkey Kong Jr.,
Right.
uh, we all think it's the NES
Mhm.
port at least is superior to the arcade version. But for Mario Brothers, it's a different story. Yeah, the NES port cut a lot out of the arcade version in this case.
Yeah.
So much so that they actually did multiple re-releases of subsequent like NES revisions
Yeah, I was
that
about
add
to
back
say
in
that.
mechanics. Yeah, well, go ahead.
Yeah, well, basically what you said. They released
Mm.
a home port of Mario Bros. Multiple times. By multiple times, I mean I don't think they've actually stopped yet. They just keep releasing it with tweaks and alterations and stuff. But fortunately, again, Arcade Archives to the rescue. We can just play Mario Bros. Arcade on the go and on our home consoles now. But yeah, it's well, simple. Yeah. It's
Accurate,
the
though.
prototypical Mario Bros game. It's got a lot of the tenets that later show up in Super Mario Bros, but sort of in their prototypical form. You
First
have
plumber.
Mm.
you have Mario and Luigi as plumbers for the first time in their endless string of blue collar work. Um, they are in sewers. There's turtles. They're not Koopa Troopas. There's hopping and hitting blocks with their fists, not their heads. Um, they're totally raising a fist in those jump animations. Look at.
Absolutely.
Um, in this instance, it's the POW block, which later came back in the series. But also, you could defeat enemies by hitting underneath them if they were on a layer above you. Um,
Which at the time probably made more sense than jumping on
Yeah.
top of them, because that was
Um,
not
Mm.
a game design
yeah,
concept.
because the turtles were actually one of the rarer enemies in the game, and the rest were like the fighter flies and the crab things and other stuff you shouldn't be jumping on. So hitting them from beneath probably made more sense for the most part. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's a
even a
good
turtle,
Um,
when
point.
you think about it, like, you wanna get it on its shell, so you wanna flip it over. So
hmm
hitting it from underneath, you
Mm.
flip over a turtle. That just
Mm,
kinda makes
yeah.
Yeah, because the bottom is vulnerable and the top is protected. That's a good point. I think the fact that you have to knock them over from below and then run around to kick them away while they're vulnerable is a fun mechanic that adds this great sense of
Yeah.
tension to it because you never know when they're going to pop up again.
which also,
hmm
I think, adds to the co-op element, because you can have somebody
Mm.
underneath flip
hmm
Hmm.
them over, and the person on top
Yeah,
can
yeah.
so it's a fun co-op
Definitely.
game.
Yeah,
That also has
great
as
game design.
competitive features as Nintendo was wont to do. So
Yeah,
you each have individual scores, but you're also working together, or else you won't be able to progress easily. So
something
yeah.
Nintendo still does to this day with their multiplayer game.
Mm-hmm. Um, and yeah, it's a really good design. The initial home console release was shit. Uh, well, maybe not shit, but yeah, it cut a lot out. Um, I
It had a
actually
lot of
haven't played the original release in ages, and I can't remember everything that was cut out. So, someone who's
But
done
yeah,
research more recently than me, comment, please.
but I imagine Mario Brothers was a game that had a lot of ports to, like, Coleco, Atari had all of those.
Hmm.
I imagine, right? Like, it was one of those
yeah,
games kind of
Yeah,
everywhere.
yeah.
yeah.
There's a lot to dig into.
Um, yeah. Again, not like Donkey Kong is the one that everybody knows about as far as the home console ports go. Mario Bros. Does have a lot of home console ports, but you don't see them talked about a whole lot.
Well,
Strange, because
maybe
it's
it's because
Mario.
they kept iterating on it that the individual ports don't get much attention
That's
because they had those three
true.
separate releases on the NES with the original and then the re-release in Japan, which was called Kayete Kita
Hmm.
or Return of Mario
Yeah.
Brothers. And then Europe got a classic series re-release that uh, is kind of a mix of the two.
Hmm.
But the fact that, you know, for one thing, the battle mode in Super Mario Brothers 3 is an iteration
Yeah,
on
yeah.
this Mario Brothers concept. So
Mhm.
that kind of supersedes the early release.
Hmm.
And then you get the playable, the multiplayer version in the Game Boy Advance ports and Superstar Saga.
Hmm.
And so they just keep re-releasing it in new and upgraded versions.
Yeah,
So you don't need to rely on the old ports.
that's true. Like,
Yeah.
I think Mario Bros. In some version is probably the Mario game that the most people have access to, just because it's probably on something you own
Yeah,
already.
exactly.
Everywhere. And I do like how they modernize it in the Game Boy Advance releases,
Hmm.
where
Mm.
because everybody's so used to Mario jumping on enemies, they had to change the turtles into spinies.
Yep.
So it's like, don't jump on them, guys, please.
Yeah, yeah.
Makes
True.
sense. Yeah. And not
Uh,
just these re-releases, it got iterated on by Hudson at the time.
oh, right, right, yeah.
Um, we mentioned Daigyakushu before as
Hmm.
the follow-up to Donkey Kong 3, but at the same time they were doing um,
Port
these other
quills of
equivalent
other
things. Yeah,
games.
port calls.
Uh,
So you get Punch Ball Mario Brothers,
yep.
where
Really?
you, in addition to all these mechanics that were already there, you have a little ball that you're dribbling around and throwing at enemies.
If you want a modern iteration on that, you should go buy Anton Ball Deluxe on a
Ooh,
Nintendo
yes.
Switch that our friend Cameron worked on and did art for.
I'll do
Mm-hmm.
that after the show.
Good
Um,
plug. Good plug.
there was also Mario Bros. Special, where
Mm,
the goal was not to defeat enemies; it was actually to get from one part of the level to the other,
mm.
with an entrance and an exit to each stage.
That one's
W-
fascinating because it had enemies from Mario Brothers, and I think it even had the hammer from Donkey Kong. I want to.
yeah, it's interesting. There's a They did that a lot, where they would kind of remix stuff. They brought
I
in some
think,
stuff from other games to Super Mario Bros. Special as well.
yeah,
So
I think that's what you're thinking of,
Yeah, I think it is.
Julius.
yeah,
Super
But
Mario Bros.
Mario Brothers Special is
Mario.
similarly like yeah, a new version of Mario Brothers, but with new
yeah,
mechanics,
hmm
Kept doing
moving
that.
platforms and stuff.
yeah. They did that a lot. I think that's neat. Um,
Mm.
it would have been interesting to see what else they came up with if they got to continue doing that sort of thing with other titles, or just they did a lot of iterations of Mario Bros. It would have been interesting to see more iterations on other things. Like Daigakushu wasn't actually one of their pertquills. It was as like it wasn't one of their planned ones. It just sort of happily worked out that way because it was the product of one of their like write-in contests.
Oh yeah, like a
Um,
bedroom coder. Yeah.
yeah. So it would have been interesting to see what they would have done if they had sat down to do like Donkey Kong 3 special or something.
Hmm. Yeah. So Mario Brothers is a really interesting case
Yeah.
where a lot of the initial ports were, inferior cutback versions from the arcade, but then they continued to make versions of it that ended up adding new things, and surpassing the arcade version. And we should also mention
Mm-hmm.
Mario Clash,
Yes,
the
yes.
Right.
kind of version of it on the Virtual Boy,
Mm-hmm.
which used the
An
different layers of
excellent game which started out as the battle mode for the
mm,
intended Super Mario Land Virtual Boy game and
mm,
grew into its own thing
It
with
is
the
yeah,
main title getting canceled.
the sequel to Mario Brothers in a sense.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I'll just slip in here because I forgot to mention it earlier that in a similar way, that some ports add new content. Uh, Actually, Gibbon alluded to it that uh, in Donkey Kong Jr., when it was being
Mm-hmm.
ported to the Coleco Adam, which was one of their home computer systems,
Mm-hmm.
the developers inserted a new level inside a kitchen. I think it was dummied out of the final release because, as you said, Nintendo
Yeah.
said, no, you can't put new stuff in.
Mm-hmm.
But more recently, people have managed to restore what was created at the
Yeah,
time for
it's
this
not a
port.
fully working level. Like it doesn't have proper collision on a bunch of things and stuff. But the graphics are there and you can run around the area.
It's a great concept.
Yeah,
A
it's
giant
an
kitchen that
interesting
you're
level. It's a giant
platforming through.
giant kitchen. There's like a giant pie in it. Mario's got some unique animations for the level.
Mm.
Um, it would have been interesting to see what the sort of
Yeah.
There's evil dough man and a toaster that
yeah.
shoots toast at you because
Hmm.
all toasters toast toast.
Um, yeah.
Anyway, just wanted to get that in there.
Let's see what else is on our list. Wrecking Crew. Oh, Wrecking Crew is a really interesting one
Mm.
because they're basically different games, the arcade version versus the home console version.
Mm.
Really?
Because the the arcade version's a head-to-head versus thing with two screens that were on opposite sides. So like one person would sit on one side and the other person would sit on the other side. And one person was Mario and one person was Luigi, and the other player would show up in the background layer of the opposite's game.
That's really cool.
And the maps were like
Yeah.
single screen, and it was basically a head to head, like trying to trap your opponent and get more points to them and stuff. And like they
Yeah,
weren't
it's a really cool mechanic that
they
works
it
so
was
well with the back-to-back cabinet
yeah.
set up in an arcade. Um,
I think
Perfectly matches the
yeah.
in-game mechanic.
It
Yeah.
was the sort of the flagship title of the Versus system, which was
Mm.
that line of arcade games that had that sort of head-to-head setup, but I think it was the only one to sort of make use of it to that degree, like take
Mm.
advantage of the layout like that.
Yeah.
And the levels were, like I was saying, single screen. They were still sort of light puzzle elements, but it was mostly about using the level to your advantage to muck over your opponent.
Mm.
The home console release obviously couldn't do that format at all,
Mm.
and replaced background layer Luigi with the new antagonistic form and Spike. character. So he's
Oh.
kind of a replacement for that other player on the other side of the screen.
Huh.
And it changes the
And
game into a bit more of a puzzle
yeah, it's a bit
platformer.
more of a puzzle platformer. The levels are larger and more intricate. They can be multi-screen now, like they can scroll up um, to be bigger than one screen high, and like the there are some levels that you kind of have to sit down and think about how to approach them in or and the goal is to defeat all enemies to move on to the next level,
Hmm.
sort of thing. Well, not defeat all enemies, but to destroy everything and basically clear the level objectives. But
Mm.
there's very like you have to be methodical about it later in the game. There's definitely like, oh, I did one wrong thing, time to restart this level and try to figure out the correct sequence of stuff to do while avoiding enemies.
Mm.
So yeah, they're like I would basically say they're different games that have similar titles.
They do look
Mm,
very different. I mean, they are like versus Wrecking Crew is a different title.
yeah.
Mm.
Well, like the other versus games are not as different as Wrecking Crew is. Like it's
Oh, the most different of
wild
all.
example of that. Um,
Yeah.
Other
It
The
examples
core
would be
design being different.
like versus Ice Climbers, which is a bit like the graphics are a bit higher fidelity. It has some bonus stages that the home console release doesn't have, and like I think one feature in that like if you complete some requirements, the vulture at the top will be like a butterfly that gives you bonuses or something.
Each of
Um,
like Super Mario Brothers versus is different layouts for levels. And I just recently
Yeah,
played at
that's
the
right.
arcade as well, versus Duck
yeah.
Hunt, which adds a whole bonus mode where you can
hmm
actually shoot the
Yeah,
dog.
it's really interesting looking at Nintendo's
Wow.
line of arcade releases. They had another line of arcade releases that was not the Versus line because the Versus line was about specifically um like competition and doing versus stuff, but they also had just sort of general
The Play
arcade
Choice
release.
10.
Yeah, the Play Choice 10 stuff.
Mm.
Which had a like a second screen up above the main screen that was um it's basically like ASCII graphics only up on the top screen, but it would
Like a
like
pinball machine.
have hints and extra information and maybe
Oh,
other
wow.
stuff. But the most notable release on the PlayStation 10 would be Metroid, which had a map on the top screen that tracked your progress
What?
and
Goodness,
kept track of your power ups and stuff.
what?
No
Well,
way.
then
Yeah, like go look up some videos of the
I'll
PlayStation
be
10 Metroid release with the second
page.
screen shown.
That's
Because I mean, the
amazing.
dual screen was initially part of Punch Out, and they just kept that going.
Mm.
These
Yeah, that's right. Um, and an interesting thing about the Versus system as well is that it was based on NES hardware. So we were
Mm-hmm.
talking before about the arcade games being built on more powerful hardware that had to be reduced, restricted, limited for a home port.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, they and this happened a lot with like Naomi Dreamcast, the Triforce arcade being kind of like a GameCube. It's basically NES hardware made into an arcade machine, and they had variations on them, like you say, for game designs for those releases.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not a case where the home ports are cut back versions of these things. In fact, a lot of the time, I think with the Versus system, they made a NES game and then they made the Versus system
Yeah,
version, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
For the most part, yeah.
case
yeah,
for Wrecking Crew,
more or
which
less.
was arcade first, I
Yep,
believe. Yeah.
yep, yep.
Yes.
So yeah, you're not getting these versions that feel inferior for the home system. You're getting alternate versions with different mechanics and similar
Mm-hmm.
levels of aesthetic fidelity. So yeah,
Yeah.
fascinating. And we should mention golf at this point too, because it's in the same family of
Yeah, yeah.
hardware.
So there's the NES game Golf, which notoriously has as Lou Albano Mario on the cover, and you'll never be able to convince me differently. Um,
One argue.
He's had a haircut, clearly.
yeah, yeah. And it's a pretty rudimentary golf game, but you're playing as this I guess more realistically proportioned Mario looking guy playing golf. But there are a couple different versions of this in the arcades. So as we mentioned, they would often take an NES game and then make the Versus arcade version of it. So you had Versus Golf, which was basically exactly the same thing. But then you had Versus Ladies Golf.
Or Stroke and Match Golf, ladies version.
Yeah.
Mario.
Where you were not playing as Mario, you were playing as a lady.
But
And
not
since we all knew that Lady is the other name of Pauline, I stubbornly insist that
Yeah,
this is a playable appearance of Pauline in the arcades.
why not? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, all on board with that.
But yeah, I don't actually know if there's any other differences. I think it was literally just, hey, look, it's a woman instead of a man.
Right hack, kind of.
Kind of.
Do they have different course layouts?
I don't
I don't
actually
know.
think so.
Is this the game where they took those course layouts and Wii Sports Golf has the same layouts in 3D?
I believe so, yeah.
That's so cool. I'm ever since I learned that, I think about it sometimes. I'm like, that's amazing.
Golf is also one of those hidden games on the Switch. I think for Iwata's birthday, I think it was.
That's
Right,
right.
yeah.
And then they removed it in an update.
To play
Hmm.
golf,
Yeah.
something along those.
Yeah, so weird.
So yeah, golf
Um,
is an interesting one. It was a NES game first, right? This is versus
yeah.
after.
I believe so.
Yeah, I believe so, yeah. I guess as a final note, the last thing on our list, kind of wrapping back around to the beginning thematically, it would be Congo Bongo.
Mm.
Not a Nintendo game,
Sega.
but it's a Sega game. It was the
It's
first.
also an Ikegami Tsushinki
It
game.
is an Ikegami Tsujinki game. It was the first isometric. Well, first isometric platformer. There were previous isometric games. Like this, Congo Bongo was actually built on Zaxxon engine, which was an
Yeah.
isometric shmup.
Mm.
And there isn't previous. There's stuff like Qbert.
Yeah, and Ant Attack on the
and
Spectrum.
Ant Attack and some other things that like you could. They're sort of the prototype for the isometric platformer, but they're not like there yet. You know.
Mm.
Um, I think this is
Yeah,
the
well, and
one that meets all the sort of checklist of things you would expect to find. Just sort of how like Donkey Kong wasn't necessarily the first platformer, but it was the first one that people kind of acknowledge as the if we go back evolutionarily, this is where we stop calling them Homo habilis and start calling them Homo sapien, sort of thing. um, so yeah, it's basically isometric Donkey Kong, to put it
Mm.
bluntly.
Mhm.
Um, I am convinced that it was literally going to be isometric Donkey Kong because it was made during a period where Sega was owned by an American company and was doing some licensing deals with Nintendo, and it is known that they
Mm.
were in talks to do some Donkey Kong titles as one of the licensed properties, and those were in production already when Sega was sold back to its Japanese parent company, and the licensing deals didn't go through with that, didn't go with them because they were with the American parent company.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, the
so
one we always hear about is where Donkey Kong was working as a car park attendant for some reason.
Yep. Yeah, that one's kind of baffling. But yeah, Congo Bongo came out sort of in that window and is by Ikegami, the people who were subcontracted to do the programming for the original Donkey Kong, and is suspiciously Donkey Kong-ish and has a suspiciously amateurish title screen as if it had to be replaced at the last minute. Um,
Yeah, I think it's called Tip Top in some markets as well.
Now, Congo Bongo was actually at the arcade
mm.
that I went to.
Nice.
Some
Did
photos
you
of
play
it,
it?
but I didn't play it. I get to play it,
Okay.
but it looks impressive.
Yeah,
Yeah, you only have so many
it's
quarters.
got it's got pretty good graphics. It has a lot of stuff. Like I think when I finally got a chance to show it to Heil, he was surprised at how sort of prototype Donkey Kong Country it felt because it's got a lot of that sort of African jungles and savanna, and like
Environments are very deep.
England has like
Cool.
rhinoes and crocodiles and
Oh yeah,
stuff.
Like
there's
a
wildlife everywhere. It's great.
maze.
hmm
And the green monkey.
and a green monkey. It's got a lot going on. So you're playing as Safari Sam, and you're sort of platforming around. And there's different sort of obstacles and objectives in each level. But the main objective is to get up to Bongo, and he'll run off to the next screen, obviously, because that's what Kongs do.
Mhm.
And it's like there's not a whole lot to it, but it's the first of its kind, so cut it some slack.
Mm.
Um,
And what's interesting about it for this discussion is the changes that Homeports had to make because they couldn't support this fancy new isometric perspective.
yeah, the home consoles could not do
No.
ISO at all.
Yeah, some of them tried, which
Generously will admit that they may have they may have envisioned that when they
I
started
think
out.
some of them are ambitious and pretty okay.
Mm, I think you're giving them more credit than they deserve. They're pretty bad. They're all pretty bad. Well,
Yeah,
no. Some of them are perfectly fun and acceptable. All of them fall very short of
Oh, yeah.
achieving the actual goal of replicating anything close to the arcade experience.
Right. From what
Yeah,
I'm
and a lot
seeing,
of them also cut out levels, much like the
Yeah,
Donkey
yeah.
Kong imports. Yeah.
yeah, there's nothing like an NES version of Donkey Kong for Congo Bongo. There's nothing close to that.
But like Donkey Kong, it did get like 1,000,001 home ports. Because it just got ported everywhere.
Wow. Yeah, I'm seeing some now. The Apple II, kind of nice.
Yeah.
Looks kind of nice.
Yeah, there are one or two that like sorta get close. Like at least in looks. In controls, no, they're crap. I've played most of them, and even the ones that like look closer to the arcade version don't play like it at all.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, ironically, when you translate them to a 2D perspective, like for example, the Sega SG-1000 version, it ends up looking and feeling a lot more like Donkey Kong itself.
yeah, funny of that.
Very funny.
Some of these rudimentary graphics looks like Congo Bongo is throwing barrels. He's not throwing barrels though, is he?
No, he's throwing coconuts.
They look like barrels in these ports.
Go figure.
Funny about that.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, that one's
You
less
should talk
like.
about the. Sorry, go on.
I was gonna say it would have been interesting if they'd taken looked at other things like Qbert and maybe
Mm.
done sort of like a maybe not tried to adhere so closely to getting all the basic features in, and instead focused on the isometric aspect, because I think if you'd I don't know if it maybe played a bit more like Qbert but looked a bit more like Donkey Kong, you probably would have had a winner for a home console version. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mm.
Stick to
I
the base.
think the ColecoVision one is acknowledged as the best at capturing the isometric gameplay.
Oh yeah, gameplay wise. Can see.
Mhm.
Yeah, this is. I mean, that's a tough job for anyone to port this game. The isometric
Yeah.
Yeah.
can't be too hard on them. Difficult.
Do you want to talk about the PS2 version, Gibbon?
Oh God. So similar to Game and Watch Gallery, Sega ran lots of companies actually ran lots of collections of their old games with updated quote unquote modern versions of them in tandem, similar to what Game and Watch Gallery was doing over at Nintendo. And one of the Sega collections thereof included Congo Bongo with a quote unquote modern version of it, which includes 5 new levels. The first 4 serve as sort of a prologue to the original 4, sort of leading up to them.
Hmm.
And then the final level has been replaced with a new final level that has a bit more involved and has a bit more of a big boss confrontation feel to it, even if
Hmm.
it's not an actual boss fight. And it's again, it's more like Donkey Kong Country-ish. There's, like Kong ancient ruin heads and traps and stuff going on, and like
Yeah, they've revamped the graphical style.
and Safari Sam looks more like Saberman in this entry. And you'll never convince me that he's not just Saberman, and this is Saberman versus Donkey Kong.
Well, we don't know
Um,
Saberman's first name, so
it's Sam, obviously. We said right
exactly.
there. Um, Safari Sam, the Saberman. Um, so there's 8 levels instead of 4, and 5 of them are new, and one of the old ones is gone. And the graphics are better, except for one thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
There's no drop shadows in the game.
Oh,
We all lose.
the
Yeah,
worst
you do.
platformer.
It's the cardinal sin of 3D platformers. It made the game a real hassle to play, let me tell you.
And it's not like they had the excuse of this still being pioneering in the 3D platformer space. This is on the PS2. They've been making 3D platformers for years at this point.
Yeah. It was bad. I was really angry when I noticed it. You can check my YouTube archive to see how angry I was
The
when I
developer.
noticed that. I'm not actually sure who the developer was on that. I should look it up.
No.
But Sega published it, so they should have known better.
I mean,
Um,
Sega, their history of platforming isn't the best, in my opinion.
like it was everything else about it was pretty great. I liked the other revisions they made. I liked the updated graphics. I liked fleshing out the story. There were new sort of like level transition stuff going on. Like it was, and the final confrontation is like Congo's like in the middle of this little temple ruin area, and you have to use your torch to like light the ropes holding up the platform he's on to dump him in a pit
Huh.
and stuff like that. Like it's fun. It's a great little modern version. It just has one very critical flaw to it. So yeah.
Yeah,
Do you know
I
what
mean,
volume of the Sega Ages re-release
Oh,
it was?
probably because I think it's on the DK Critter list.
Oh yeah, it should be.
Um,
I'm just looking up the developer.
Sega Ages Collection V23. It's what I'm.
yeah.
23.
It is impressive. I'm looking at the animations.
Mm-hmm.
It looks beautiful. I don't know if I would play as well.
Yeah, for a long time I
Oh
was
yeah,
the
okay.
only one with any video footage of this on the internet, but I think there's one or other two
I'm
people.
watching your footage. Very
Gibbon the
nice.
Archivist. Yeah, so volume 23, Sega Memorial Selection. Apparently D3 Publisher was involved in the early releases, but by the time of the Congo Bongo one, Sega had taken it in-house, I believe.
Hmm. Well, shame on
Possibly,
Sega.
and M2 was involved with some of them, but I'm not
Hmm.
sure if it was that one.
Oh, SegaRetro.org says that Volume 23 was developed by Japan Art Media.
Oh,
Yep.
Should have known better. Well, they
I'm
know the art.
I'm not
Apparently.
getting relevant results for that by searching for
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Hmm. Anyway.
So in a way, you can say it has a port that is in many ways superior to the arcade original.
I mean, it was the most convenient way to play the arcade version up to that point because it also came with the arcade version. So you could play that on PS2 if you had a Japanese PS2 or you lived in Japan.
Hmm.
Um, I don't think there's a like that's not on Arcade Archives yet, is it? I don't think.
Congo Bongo? I don't think so.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. It was available on the Sega Mega Drive Ultimate Collection for PS3 and
Oh.
other consoles in that generation. It's one of the unlockable extras.
Ooh, nice, nice. So you can play it on okay, not recent things. Um I'd say Congo Bongo is worth a shot if you have access to it. Um,
It's at the Brookfield Galaxy Club near Chicago if you want to play it.
There you go.
um,
That brings us full circle.
it's at some of the
Well done.
arcades up here in Seattle as well. So
I think you can play Donkey Kong on like this multi retro arcade cabinet in a laser tag place in Canberra.
mm,
There you go. There's my local contribution for you.
yeah,
Donkey Kong Trilogy with
yeah.
Mario.
I think it's just got a ton of stuff like Pac-Man and things. So
Mm,
don't know if it's official.
but yeah.
Speaking of the trilogy, I want to touch on
Mm.
Donkey Kong 2
Oh
for the
yeah.
Game & Watch.
Oh
The only
okay.
official Donkey Kong 2. In preparation for this, I actually played the original Game & Watch version as well as the ports, since we're talking
Mm,
about ports,
okay.
on Game & Watch Gallery 3. And so practically identical gameplay-wise, but the visuals in
mm,
Watch, oh, they're so good.
yeah.
So much personality and character in each little frame. And also you have the layers of background. You have background and foreground art, which just, for a Game & Watch, so immersive, especially the top and bottom screens together. So just want to do a little shout out to Donkey Kong 2 because it has a
Mm.
decent port, but also it's worth the play for sure.
Okay.
That's
Cool.
a great point. The Game and Watch games are sort of in a way, uh, home ports of their own because they're a way for a consumer to
That's
get
true.
an
Yeah.
experience like the arcade game,
Yeah.
but
True.
one that they could own, and yeah,
Do we
and
want to give a
portably too.
quick rundown of those Game and Watch then?
Oh,
Well,
there's so
go for it.
many.
Well, they're not that many. So for Donkey Kong, you had the Game and Watch that everybody knows. It was basically a recreation of 25 meters with some extra stuff, like there was a crane and things, and
Yeah,
actually the
the new
first
mechanics are
appearance.
the coolest thing about
Yeah,
it
the
for
first
me.
appearance of Donkey Kong Jr. as the alarm functionality on the
Hmm.
game, then known as Mini Donkey Kong.
Hey,
Also, the
Uh,
first appearance of a D-pad.
ooh, I
Yeah,
hadn't thought about that, but you're right.
it
Wow.
is.
and
Also, it's the form factor of a DS, basically.
True.
First appearance of that
Um,
too.
Donkey
revolutionary game.
Kong Jr. had a plethora of Game and Watch adaptations. There was Donkey Kong Jr., which replicates. Is it the first two levels, or is that Donkey Kong 2 that replicates the first two levels?
I feel Donkey Kong 2 is the last two levels.
Okay, so Donkey Kong Jr. replicates the first two levels, sort of mashed together, and then Donkey Kong 2 represents the last two levels mashed together, the Mario's Hideout
More or
levels.
less.
That's the cool thing about
Um,
Donkey Kong 2 is the bottom screen is the third level, the top screen is the
yeah,
fourth.
yeah, I
Mm.
love when they mash stuff up like that. But
Yeah,
it
there are
also
also
had,
Coleco tabletop
yeah,
LCD versions
exactly.
of DK and Junior.
hmm Whereas DK's was basically the same concept, although a bit more simplified from the actual Game and Watch release. I guess a straighter rendition of 25 meter. The Donkey Kong Jr. release was a lot more inventive and was sort of
And colorful.
colorful and sort of platforming through this, I don't know, jungle obstacle course. It had like balloons you rode on and little and enemies to avoid and stuff, getting from one side of the screen to the other. I think it might have been the first appearance of balloons in the Donkey Kong series. Now that I think about it,
I think you're right. Yeah.
um,
And the retro game. This big influence.
um, Donkey Kong 3 sort of has two associated Game and Watches. It has Greenhouse, which came out prior to it. Donkey
Bouncy.
Kong 3 is kind of a sequel to it, actually,
Mm.
which is the sort of same basic premise of Stanley with a fumigating gun protecting plants from insects.
No, we have a theme here. Donkey Kong Game and Watch introduced Donkey Kong Jr.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have the balloons, another one, and now we have Donkey Kong 3 was also and we have Mario Brothers, which introduced Luigi. The Game
Mm-hmm.
and the Game and Watch in many
That's
ways
true.
introduced parallel to all of these.
The Mario Bros. Game & Watch predates the arcade game called Mario Bros. And is a completely different title.
Totally different.
Um,
Bottling factory.
yeah. Greenhouse introduced Stanley and the basic concept that was then later used in Donkey Kong 3
It also
on
introduced
consoles.
Alarm Cat.
It also introduced Alarm Cat, who would show up in later Game & Watch games. And since it's Stanley's cat, you can't tell me that it's not Stanley in those games. Suck it. But Donkey Kong 3 itself also had a Game & Watch title, and it was one of the first head-to-head ones, I think.
Yeah.
Does it
think so.
predate Donkey Kong Hockey? I think it
think
predates
so.
Donkey Kong Hockey.
I think was
But it was the first one of the early head-to-head multiplayer ones where instead of a Stanley at the bottom of the screen fighting Donkey Kong at the top of the screen, you had one player playing as Stanley and one player playing as Donkey Kong, or the CPU playing as Donkey Kong on the left and
Is
right
this
sides.
is this the first playable instance of Senior, or was Circus before
I believe Circus was one of the last Game & Watch games to come out.
Oh,
this? Yeah, because
So-
Circus is a conversion of a Mickey Mouse title.
Yeah. So
Mm.
I think, yeah, this was probably one of the earliest
Donkey Kong's.
Donkey Kong Senior instances.
Now, each of these Game & Watch games are on the Game & Watch Gallery series with modern versions. Aside from Donkey Kong 2, it does not have a modern version.
Yeah,
And Hockey is not there either.
yeah. I don't think Mario Circus has a modern version either.
No, I don't think
No,
it's
not a modern
even,
version.
even the classic isn't even in any of the
Is it?
gallery.
Oh, that's disappointing.
I don't think it got a Japanese release, so I think they have a blind
Mm.
spot for it.
That might have been it.
Could be one, yeah.
An
Donkey Kong
early
there.
example of Mario being a total jerkass.
Oh yeah, that definitely frames Mario as the villain. In
he's
combination with Junior.
totally the
So
villain in that series.
it's essential
Yeah.
to that viewpoint. Yeah.
Yeah, Donkey Kong Circus was September 84.
Oh, wow, yeah, way later.
Donkey Kong 3 Micro vs. Simple was August of 84. Where is Donkey Kong? Oh, Donkey Kong Hockey was November of 84. So, yeah.
3.
Yeah.
First playable appearance of Senior.
Yep. There you go.
Nice.
It's
All this
the Game & Watch
stuff
series.
being pioneered in the Game & Watch series.
Introducing so much to the world that's still here today.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of the gameplay of Donkey Kong 3, it is a strange one because it's so unlike the source material. You are shooting bug spray at what were they bugs into like each
Yeah,
other's.
they're little bees. I guess, early example of bees. Well, I guess that would have originated in Donkey Kong 3. Introducing bees to the series. You had sort of bees that you were trying to harass back and forth at each other
Yeah,
and keep up with it because there were multiple tiers, like there 3 tiers, I think, and you had to
we,
refill your canisters at a refill station and continue spraying to push the objective back and forth in sort of a reverse tug of war situation.
It is-
Except there could be more than one bee.
and the modern version had bubbles instead of bug spray.
Yeah, the modern
Yeah.
version was
It also replaced Stanley with Mario.
so much hate.
Tisk tisk.
Well. But yeah, it was a really interesting gameplay concept, and I would have loved to see a blown up arcade version of that sort of gameplay paradigm as well. I could see that being a sort of popular with like on a big screen with more buttons and screen real estate to work with. You could have done some interesting stuff with that.
Honestly, I think that concept probably would have been more popular than the arcade or the NES Donkey Kong 3 that we actually got.
Yeah, it might have
'Cause it was
been.
an exciting multiplayer game.
That's true. I hadn't considered that. If
Hmm.
the console version had been sort of based on the Game & Watch version instead. Yeah, that could have been pretty neat.
Yeah. Because other than that, Mario Brothers has a multiplayer component and versus Wrecking Crew, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, not much else in the Arcadia it does.
Yeah.
M83, like simultaneous multiplayer was becoming a bigger thing
Mm-hmm.
for sure.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, they didn't really exist on home consoles at the time.
Mm.
That I'm trying to think of what maybe like fighting games on the next generation were, but before that, yeah, I don't know.
Alternating.
Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, lots of ports. And honestly, I think the Game and Watch ones might hold up the best because they really do their own thing.
They
And
do. They're very
I feel like they're
interesting.
the ones worth playing the most if you're going to go to any port. These are barely ports. These are like their own games that are really fun. Like if you go back to them, like these are just standalone games that are really fun. You don't even need to play the
Yeah.
original that they're. So
I
Yeah.
spent so many hours playing Donkey Kong Jr. in Game and Watch Gallery.
yeah, I actually had a.
I
Donkey
didn't
Kong
expect
Junior.
our episode on arcade ports to home systems conversions to finish with a ringing endorsement of the Game & Watch, but yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I had the Donkey Kong Junior Game and Watch as a kid, the mini classics that they re-released.
Mm.
So I guess
Ooh,
another
yeah,
port
yeah.
of them. Yeah, so they kept them going.
They
Mhm.
did. And they kept re-releasing them in various ways for a while. Like they had those Club Nintendo ones, but I don't think any of those were Donkey Kong. But
I don't know.
yeah.
I know they re-released them on DS. Like there was a DS collection of Game and Watch. I don't think any of those are Donkey Kong
Yeah,
either.
those are the Club Nintendo ones I was talking about.
Okay.
They were not promotional, but they only had a couple titles on them. The second one was more, was it the first one? One of them was more interesting because it had um, Parachute and Octopus on it, and then a
Oh,
third game which mashed the two of them up. So on the
oh,
top screen was Parachute parachuting down into the boat,
oh,
and
that's
then the
awesome.
boat also served as the boat for Octopus on the bottom screen.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, that was
So,
collection 2, I believe.
yeah, and I
The
thought
first
that was
one did have Donkey Kong and Greenhouse in it.
right,
That would be the version to get then because the
yeah.
graphic fidelity of the Game and Watch Gallery
hmm
series for the classics are pretty low.
Unfortunately, it's going to cost a fortune on eBay because they were Club Nintendo rewards only in Japan.
Yeah, so weird.
Um,
In other regions too, I think.
where? Oh, right. I forgot that America was the only one that sucked.
I've got a listing here for North America, Australia, and Japan.
What?
But you could also get Donkey Kong Jr. on the DSiWare shop.
True.
I did download that too.
Was there anything different about the e-reader versions?
They didn't release e-reader game. Well, they had Manhole was the only one. The other ones were left unreleased.
Oh, I meant like there were Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Jr. on e-reader and stuff.
Oh, you mean the NES versions? Those
Yeah.
ports. Yeah, I think those were just.
Hmm.
Well, I think they might have been the squished versions that were part of the
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes
release
sense.
they had on cartridge. And it was
They had
also
to
I wanted.
cut lines
Got
of
us
vertical
got a
resolution.
cool commercial out of it though.
Oh boy, with Donkey Kong Jr. claymation. Oh god, that was amazing. Squished into a card.
hmm
But I will say, I originally played those GBA ports um,
Mm.
on Animal Crossing.
Oh,
And
right.
you can, of course, they're in Animal Crossing for GameCube. You can actually play the
hmm
NES games themselves. But if you have a GBA transfer cable,
Mm.
transfer these NES games to a Game Boy Advance, and that's
No
before.
way.
Ooh.
That's so
And
cool.
without a
Yeah.
card, play these NES games, and I remember I would just take them on the go with no cartridge in my GBA and just playing Donkey Kong.
Nice.
The
I
more
didn't know
obscure
you could do that.
you can do that.
Wild.
Yep.
If we are getting to the wrap up stage, I think should we move on to our plugs for the episode?
Yeah. That was a
Okay.
great topic, actually.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
A lot there.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry I stole your plug earlier by wanting to promote your big artwork piece up in the news section. Do you have anything else you want to plug?
I did have a backup plug. I want to plug a fan game based on the Donkey Kong Country series. It's called Donkey Kong Country: The Trilogy,
Mhm.
and you can get it at dkctrilogy.com. It's really cool because, well, for a lot of reasons. It mashes up things from all three of Rare's SNES DKC Trilogy games. in new level designs and some new mechanics. And in that sense, it's done really well, although it gets very difficult at times. So do be forewarned about that. But there's other projects that do similar things like DKC4, The Kong's Return. But this one expands the screen space to take advantage of, modern widescreen monitors.
Yeah.
So you've got this huge view of the level and, Rare's gorgeous pre-rendered assets. And it looks amazing in this format. And it also helps the level design to be able to see so much around you.
They've created new maps, CGI maps. They're just beautiful.
Yeah, there's a lot of new
Yeah,
CGI
that's
in
true.
that game.
Of the as of the 2.0 update, they added new pre-rendered map screens and NPC screens,
Gorgeous.
which are really nice to look at as well. It's a full completed game with 40 levels, and they gave me money. They ran a contest on their Facebook page, and I won the prize to find the hidden secret, which I do recommend doing. Check their most recent post on Facebook because you get 999 lives out of it.
Hey.
But yeah, the prize for being the first to discover this secret was 500 Brazilian reals. To be fair, they did not pay me because I told them to donate it to charity instead.
Oh, well then, they don't. Okay, don't misrepresent. Don't do that.
Well, now I can plug it without it being a paid promotion.
It does look great. I need to try this out.
Yeah, it looked fun watching Milo play, with the exception of a few levels that I would probably murder whoever designed them should I ever be subjected to them. So,
yeah, the last level where they reverse your controls is a real ringer. Yeah, it's rough.
that wasn't even the background that was going on while it reversed your controls.
Oh, that's
Like,
true.
I couldn't watch you play it. It was bad.
Yeah. The backdrop was rotating and glitching, and yeah.
It was it was wild.
Anyway, I think it's a really cool tribute to the DKC games and well worth playing for any fan.
Agreed.
Yeah.
My plug of the week is a light novel series that I've been reading for a few years now that is getting an anime adaptation soon-ish. Actually, when the heck is that coming out? In the land of later. They put out a promotional trailer for the anime adaptation, so I assume it's either this season or next. Yeah, January 2022 is when it's scheduled to start. But the light novel series has been going for a while. It started in January 2019 in Japan and started coming out last year over here. And it's called In the Land of Laydale. And it's one of those, like, someone wakes up in a fantasy world that is the game they used to play as their game character ones, but it's unlike stuff like Overlord or Sword Art or whatever. There's not really some big mystery going on or some like power struggle and it's not really dark fantasy or whatever. It's very sort of laid back and slice of lifey. Like, the main character is one of the like overpowered, very kind of stereotypical protags who had an awesome OP character, but like she's just kind of laid back and it's very slice of life-ish. And one of the unique things about this one is she's got family in the game because of the game had a like, oh, instead of creating mule accounts, you can create family member NPCs that'll follow you around. So she wakes up in the game world and she's like, oh crap, I have kids. And because it's like the game world a couple hundred years on and she's an elf, her kids are all still around too. So she kind of gets to, I would say deal with, but she actually enjoys her family's company. So she gets to enjoy the experience of interacting with her family in the game. In the game world, it's not really a game world anymore because it's a real world now. But she's just kind of going around enjoying herself, trying out things and visiting lands and fending off crazy relatives, sort of thing. And I think it's well written. Light novel series is published by Yen Press, and yeah, the first couple volumes are out in English.
What's the name of it again?
In the Land of Leadale, Leadale. Isekais are pretty hit and miss, in my opinion. They can be like I found that it doesn't actually matter whether it's one of the like character wakes up in another world and starts with nothing, or a character wakes up in another world and starts with everything. That doesn't actually matter. What matters is whether the writing is good or not, because that will make or break my enjoyment of a series. And this is one of the ones that's well written, in my opinion. So, yeah,
Cool.
And apparently others agree, which is why it's getting an anime adaptation. So,
nice.
An eye on it.
Yeah, following in the tradition of Super Mario Brothers the movie, the original isekai.
Noted isekai, Super Mario Brothers the movie. You're not wrong.
It invented the genre.
Yep, totally.
Yeah, let's say that.
Uh-huh.
You got anything to plug, Julius?
Sure, I'll plug the Galloping Ghost Arcade in Brookfield, Illinois.
Awesome.
Yeah, no, it's a great arcade, but I guess I could plug my own little where you can find me, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you can go my old name, Matt Dog 1 Million, with 6 zeros there. On DeviantArt is where you'll find a lot of my infrequently drawn art. Also on Twitter under, I think, Michael Julius, maybe Juliusaurus. And I usually post there here and there, but
we'll include those links in the video description.
Cool. But
yeah, you've been doing Miiverse Mondays recently, right?
Mondays, that's my new thing on Twitter.
Yep, those have been very enjoyable.
Are those old drawings that you did on Miiverse back when it was new?
Yeah,
okay, you're not doing new ones?
Well, none of them are new. Okay. Years old, but sometimes they're like really relevant to like what's happening. With,
you were prescient.
Somehow I'm like, oh look, Pyoro from WarioWare. He's a new character in the new game. Here, I'll show my Miiverse picture for some reason. Yeah, so that's been fun doing that every Monday. So check that out, I guess.
Definitely check that out, people. This guy is a wizard with a Wii U stylus. His Miiverse drawings are amazing.
Wish it was still up. They took it down.
I think some of your favorite pieces are the reimagined Candy Kong you did.
Yeah.
The reimagined Pauline you did in the Safari Git. Prior to Odyssey coming out. And then that old Miss Donkey Kong you did based on a conversation we had on the forums that then showed up in various places with people thinking it was official art.
Donkey Kong for Game Boy. And I mean, the Young Wrinkly, that's how I named it.
Yep.
Yeah, it looks pretty official.
Very, very on model.
Yeah.
Yep, he does good work. Well, yeah, this has been fun.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on the show, Michael. That was such a really cool discussion.
Yes, thank you for coming on. Thank you for inspiring us.
Love talking about Donkey Kong and learning more about the arcade era, which is before my time. So it's like, wow, I didn't know that you're talking about. It's very cool, very fast.
Yep. That's why I made the site, because Donkey Kong Country and beyond gets a lot of discussion, and the stuff that came before it doesn't. So
there's a lot there. There's a lot there. Sure.
Yep.
Cool.
Well, in that case, again, I have been Gibbon, and
I've been Milo. Hello. Yes. Goodbye. Thank you.
Okay, I don't know how to end these things.